The Wednesday, April 28th, 2021 work session of the Marquette City Commission is now called to order at 5:15 p.m. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And as this is a work session, which is a more informal meeting, I'm looking around. We have all 7 members present. Their roll call has now been conducted. I do not have any announcements at this time. I will open up public comment. Comments may not exceed 3 minutes per person. Please state your name and physical address. We don't have anyone for public comment, so we will revisit that again at the end of the meeting. Public comment is now closed. And our one topic of discussion this evening is our strategic plan. We had a work session previous to this, kind of our first round to narrow down some ideas and options, and city staff has been charged with helping present kind of a more cohesive plan for us to review, take another look at, maybe give some comments or discussion, and after that point, the strategic plan will go back to city staff for any final tweaks and then come before the city commission for final review and approval. So Dennis Stakowitz is joining us via Zoom tonight. He is the Director of Community Development, and he will be leading us through the second discussion on our strategic plan. So Dennis, go ahead and take it away.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, City Commission and Mayor. Kind of stole my thunder there on the introduction. I appreciate that. The process is very well understood. This evening, what I'd like to do is present to you a more narrowed down focus, if you will, on some projects that we've come up with as department heads, and also present to you the status sheets that were presented by the various boards and committees as we go throughout this process. We do have department heads available this evening. We have Police Chief Rebolt and Mark O'Neill from the wastewater treatment plant, Miss LePage from Administrative Services, Eric Steeman is here from Facilities and Maintenance, Fire Chief Davis for the fire department, John Swanson from Recreation, and also from the DDA, we have Becky joining us tonight, and I anticipate also Scott Convenzi will join us shortly for DPW, as they have an item on here as well. These sheets that are presented to you from the department heads are a culmination of a couple of things. First and foremost, they were that came out of an exercise that we had the department heads do, similar to what the city commission had done, where with us being the folks on the ground and the ones that work within the plans that are adopted by the city commission, we would like to offer up a few projects to help along the way. And the good news is the projects that we're presenting for the most part align with what we heard from the city commission. And some of the items in here as well are based directly off from what we did hear from the city commission at the last meeting, things along the lines of we dug into the economic development plan, the climate adaptation plan that's part of the community master plan. We took a look at the coordinated services and transit plan, which was another big item for the commission. And we also got involved with some of the maintenance folks about sidewalks, and also had discussion with Eric on the facility side of things with the green facility. So what I'd like to do this evening is, if I could, just kind of roll through the sheets to present the ideas to you as a whole. And then if there are particular questions involved or are pertaining to a sheet, we can go back to it, or an issue, we can go back to it. But for the sake of time, because there's a number of sheets, I'd like to at least kind of roll through them, present them, and then go back and take questions on them. And then we will go into the boards and committee sheets and do the same thing. So with that being said, I'd like to go ahead and I'll share my screen so that everybody can see what we're looking at here. Can everybody see that?
Not yet, and I would agree with your approach, Dennis. Thank you. Yeah, let's go ahead and run through everything,
Okay.
and then we can circle back.
All right. How about now? Yep. There we go.
Yes. Are you able
Can it
to
pop
zoom
up
in and make
behind
it just a little bigger, or?
Sure. Sure, I can do that.
Thank you.
It's going to take me a second to get it centered. How's that?
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, so the first, and just because these are listed in a certain particular department doesn't mean that the idea necessarily came from that department. It could have been an idea that came from city manager or particularly what we heard from city commissioners at the last meeting. We put it in the department that would be the most likely department for our charter and our workflow and our bandwidth that would work on it. So starting with the community development department, one of the, this was one that actually came internal, but it is related to the climate challenges that were identified by the city commission. And this is tourism planning. Inside the community master plan is the climate adaptation plan. And within that, there were some recommendations that I'll bring up here that wanted us to kind of look at, try and help our business minimize economic losses, take advantage of increased tourism, parks and rec expenditures to capitalize on changes to outdoor recreation, some maintain access to water resources, strengthen the connectivity between our shoreline and other areas so that we're resilient, and capitalize on what we see as the longer summer tourism season with climate change. And what we're really talking about here is looking at the physical, social, economic, and biophysical carrying capacity of the city in terms of trying to identify that and wrap our hands around it so we're not constantly dealing with the interface between the folks that live here and try to enjoy the quality of life and the folks that come here. And, you know, a lot of times what we hear in our office and what was presented in the master plan is that starting to create some contentious relationship. The forecast for that would, and these are just options that we're laying out there, is look at some type of tourism task force ad hoc committee so that this isn't all on the backs of the city. We would maybe look to the Visitor and Conventions Bureau and tourist-orientated agencies within the city of Marquette that have a specific focus. We would look to them to roll up their sleeves and help us with this. Potentially, we could hire a consultant to draft an actual plan. We could use that steering committee as the effort. We'd have, of course, the city manager ensuring coordination of the effort. And I have a potential cost on here. That's a ballpark estimate for consultants. And it's very conservative estimate. The reality is it's probably about 3/4 of that. But again, it's really looking at the challenge that we see on the carrying capacity of not only our social capital that we have here in the city, but actually our environment and biophysical attributes that we really appreciate for living here. The second one, through community development, is housing affordability, and this is to seek public-private partnerships. And this is based upon the ad hoc committee draft report that, and I understand that hasn't been finalized yet, but I'm throwing this out there as a potential of something that you could look at. And the report identified the need to seek public-private partnerships. And this past year, I was tasked with researching some of these partnerships by working with a development group in the Brownfield Redevelopment Finance Authority to go through an exercise to identify vacant property that's owned by the city that has been identified as surplus through a municipal property inventory, which is a document that we have on hand based off of the planning that was done for the master plan. There's potential here for a proposal to where the city commission could consider the sale of surplus property to the developer or another developer through the county land bank, which would open it up for a brownfield plan that could use tax capture on the new development to fund infrastructure and gap financing for the development itself. The cost is yet to be determined, but it's believed to all the discussions that I've had with the brownfield director and Mac McClellan that something like this is a gain for the city off of the income for the sale of the property, and then subsequent tax payments at the end of a brownfield term, which of course can be set by the city commission. Moving on to another item from community development, we have the hot topic, or one of the hot topics from the last meeting was the transportation network and the transit service. And in our community master plan, we do have referenced a project that we did with Smart Growth America, and that was that resulted in a coordinated services human transportation plan. But it was, really looking at how we move people, or more or less a mobility study. And actually, in that study, we did create a feasibility analysis on creating a 30-minute headway route that would be the 3rd Street to downtown and up to NMU's campus, and also the hospital. In 2019, based upon that one that was previously done, our city planner, Dave Stensis, helped out MarkPlan by drafting them a coordinated public transit human service transportation plan as well. That was adopted by MarkTran so that they can apply for federal FTA, or Federal Transit Administration grants. The Planning Commission has also identified this in their boards and committee thing, as well as the City Commission having a robust discussion about it. So what we were thinking is consider permitting the Planning Commission to take that on and create their own ad hoc committee to work with MarkTran and MDOT to develop some common approaches to establish that intercity transit route and evaluate some potential grant funding or other funding options for capital, which would be the vehicle and operating expenses, and then seeking those grants to test and implement an intercity bus route. Now, I had put on here also, we'd like the Planning Commission to review the LDC to ensure that appropriate permissions are in place for necessary infrastructure, meaning things such as bus stops. And I did go out and we're looking at about $10,000 per covered bus shelter. And then we would look at seek grants or commit to funding once the pilot was done. And then, at this point, I've identified that the city liaison with MarkTran would be the one responsible for any ongoing coordination. Now, as far as costs, I'll bring these up. We've got these from MarkTran. Their operating expenses are about $35 an hour, roughly $1,900 a week, and about $98,000 and some change a year. The capital expense is about $135,000 up front for purchasing a small bus, or there could be a cost share involved with that. And this has likely been identified that it would be likely subsidized depending on what kind of income they could get off from that route. Moving ahead, this is one that's kind of a conglomerate of a couple departments, but this was related to the ongoing challenges related to climate. And there is an emergency response plan that was recommended in the climate adaptation plan. And again, there's specific recommendations to prepare and implement emergency response plans that would be in concert with the county hazard mitigation plan and coordinated through our fire chief, who's our emergency response lead, for extreme storms, floods, heat waves, poor air quality days, disaster outbreaks, and so on. And basically, I know there's been a little bit of work done on this. We're going to, what we're recommending here is that the city manager would overall be responsible for a drafting or a review or an update of any plans we have to recognize any additional climate-related emergencies and ensure that they're coordinated with the county hazard mitigation plan. Well, the cost for that, we estimate there to be some staff hours in it, and then moving forward would be to implement and evaluate the plan. From the city manager's office, we have economic development planning. This falls under a couple of plans. We have the community master plan, which talks about economic development, and then of course our economic development plan that was adopted and certified by a redevelopment ready community. So we do have that plan. The stated goals in the plan talked about improving and diversifying the tax base, the employment base, supporting local business, encourage growth, and improving the city's relationship with local businesses. There have been additional strategies identified by the City Commission, including broadband internet services as a public utility, researching our ability to be an EDC, potential for adding staff, reviewing and, if necessary, updating the current plan, and collecting data on the business community. This is one where we are recommending a couple of things depending on department bandwidth and partnering agencies that could be potentially available to help us as a city when moving forward. First and foremost would be to complete the RRC certification. I hope to have that done by the time we come to you to adopt this plan. We have till June to finish that, and we've got one outstanding item remaining. Continue the implementation of the current EDP. Marquette Board of Light and Power is actually working now, and the city manager has met with them and looking at options of being a broadband provider. So we would pledge our support to them. We need to do more research on us becoming an EDC, and also have the city manager evaluate the addition of economic development planner to city staff, and whether that would be in this department or it would be in the new city manager's office could be explored. And we expect that to be about 60 to 80 staff hours to do that. Year two, budget and seek RFPs for a more robust update of the EDP, and work with community groups to obtain the data. Data would be a big part of that planning exercise. They can go out and get that data for us, and specifically focusing on things that are kind of a result of the pandemic that we've been dealing with, and continuing to support the MBLP as a broadband internet provider.
Hey Dennis, can I interrupt you just for 1 minute? You're doing a great job.
Sure.
Oh, I need my mic on. I'm sorry. Are these available to the public on the city website, or could they be? Yeah. I'm just wondering if we can maybe just do more of a summary rather than read the whole thing, because we have it right in front of us.
Oh, absolutely.
And as long as the public has access either right now or after, I don't see a need to read through every single sheet. I mean, we certainly should touch on each sheet. I'm wondering if maybe we can just talk about the forecast, year one, year two, kind of the highlights in that area, if that maybe makes sense. Because we've got them right here.
No. Message.
Sorry
I'd be glad
to throw off your.
That's
but I'm
fine.
looking at what we got to get through here, going, oh my gosh, this is going to take us hours. I appreciate it, Dennis.
Totally noted. Get moving.
Well, no, and if you think that it's important on one of these that we go through some of more of the detail, that's fine. But
no, that's fine. I'm going to move on. Okay. I've duly noted.
Dennis.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll get it. So, housing affordability. We're talking about the implementing the ad hoc committee plan and really highlighting the forecast of that. The City Commission's going to receive that plan we're going to recommend that you forward it to the Planning Commission, get it into the master plan, have the Planning Commission start working on the zoning things, and direct the city manager to implement other portions of the plan where he can or she can. Moving forward, community services. This is moving into John's network and his department of recreation and arts and culture, and looking at an economic impact study of arts and culture. And there was a master plan in 2014. It was a 10-year plan. It identified the city supporting arts, which you do. It has a range of initiatives in there. And really what they'd like to do is seek some funding through the American Center for the Arts and Economic Prosperity Program to conduct an economic impact study for Marquette. And once they do that, if they get the grant, then they'll promote the findings and then move forward. Next one coming from community services and related to arts and culture and the park and recreation master plan, as well as community development having a role in this, helping them, is the cultural trail. This identified the plan, again, that was done in 2014, identified a cultural trail along our bike path. This would include interpretive signage, public art, seating areas. Basically what they're asking to do is continue to work with the stakeholders, which there are many of them. The Iron Ore Heritage Trail is one, Arts and Culture Committee and others, to start researching and developing that. They've been working on it for some time. They actually are believed to the point of coming up to look at and getting some bids for signs and things along those lines. Again, in community service is the implementation of the Parks and Recreation Master Plan. Now, the 5-year plan implements a number of improvements, and you can see those on the screen and before you. What we are recommending is we continue to fund these in accordance with our capital improvements plan and seek grants to keep doing that. And I won't go through those all one by one. They can be found on the rec plan online, and these things will be online. Another one for community services, and this was an outcome of the senior center study, was to revisit that senior center study, say that fast 3 times, to plan for the future of the Marquette Senior Center. And in 2012, there were a few scenarios that were looked at, and it was relocation, renovation, or building a new center. What they're asking for is to move forward and establish an ad hoc committee to study that, and then take the results of that study and start looking for partnerships and funding to move forward with it. Community Services and Recreation Master Plan called for an additional soccer field by removing 1 baseball field. I really can't summarize it any better than the title. You're really being asked to identify some funding sources and partners to cut a baseball field and add a soccer field. Moving on to the fire department, this one's been on the books for a while. It's the Consolidated fire station. Again, we're continuing to do a study and a needs analysis, and then looking later on, and I have Ian told me about this on here that I apologize, there was a little mistake, but we're going to complete the needs analysis, complete an RFQ, and then by 2024, hopefully work toward the bid and build process. Facilities and maintenance coming from Eric Steeman. This is the Green Fleet and Buildings Plan coming out of the Community Master Plan. What Eric is asking for is to hire a consultant to evaluate the potential of shifting the motor pool fleet to alternative energy vehicles and investigate new opportunities to further reduce energy consumption in municipal operations. Has a cost of approximately $75,000 to $100,000 on there. and then we would move forward with implementing the results of that plan. Finance, this is a long-term financial plan. I think it kind of speaks for itself. We have a number of sleeping dragons that we need to look at, such as Cliffsdale, the unfunded benefit liability, some improvements to Matson Park, finishing Lakeshore Boulevard, Lakeview Arena, and so on. This would be a in-house work effort with a comprehensive list and issues, and then coming up with a plan for that moving forward. And then we had the Sleeping Dragons list, which is always the fun one to look at. That's basically $68 million of cost potentially that could be a burden on the city. And then moving into public works, a big item last time was winter maintenance of sidewalks. Director Combenzi had put this in here, and basically the forecast is we need to have a community exercise and define the level of service for winter maintenance, and then take a look at the resources we have to do that. Now, whether that comes in the form of implementing, some time ago we had a draft ordinance prepared that would put the onus on property owners to clear sidewalks, or the alternative to that is to fund more equipment and increase the cost associated with that to have more robust effort done by city staff. So that closes out these items. I'm going to take the screen share down, and then I'm going to mute myself and turn it back over to the City Commission. And if you have particular questions about an item, I'll answer what I can. Otherwise, we have the department heads and city manager available. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dennis. I appreciate it. You did a really nice job. So I just want to be clear. I've got two documents in front of me. Are we still going to go through the other document?
Yeah, why are we separating?
Yes, ma'am.
Can we do that
Yes,
before
ma'am,
we open it up to comments from the commission, please? So,
if you want to.
yeah,
I'd be glad
I'd rather
to
do
do
it that way. Thank you, Dennis. And then just so the commission knows, what I plan to do is run through the commission, give everyone a chance to individually ask questions, comments, and then I will give an additional chance after we all run through for any quick follow-up questions. No speeches, please. Thank you.
Okay, I am now sharing. These are the sheets that came from the boards and committees, and you're going to see some overlap here. Implementation of the Arts and Culture Master Plan. Okay, we adopted the plan. There's some things in there that we identified as particular projects, would be the economic impact study and then the cultural trail. And then there's also talking in here about promoting implementation of Marquette Compass, which is an arts effort, and then moving forward from there. This was an important one at the last meeting. This was wayfinding, branding, and signage. Now, this was identified by the Downtown Development Authority. They had recently done a downtown plan, and that downtown plan talked about creating more identity logos and things along those lines, including gateway and wayfinding signage. They've included some costs here for the gateway signage. And then we also want to, as part of a combined effort with the current project in community development that we're working on, the on-street bike network and wayfinding, that would also be done in conjunction with this. The Downtown Development Authority also presented an issue on parking management. So they had talked about replacing meters. Okay, so this is, they've done really well with the meters that they've had, but they do need, they're tired already and they need some replacement. This also includes beginning planning for looking at a needs analysis for another parking structure, either expansion or replacement. The DDA would also like to work towards TIF expansion for North 3rd Street. In 2011, the City Commission did extend the district into North 3rd Street, and there was a grant to do that plan, the 3rd Street Corridor Plan. And in addition to the recent plan, they're getting a lot of positive feedback and things going on in 3rd Street. However, there's not really a mechanism to pay for that. So they're looking at pursuing the TIF district expansion. The Harbor Advisory Committee has looked at Cinder Pond Marina replacement. They want to start looking at discussing replacement of those docks and slips in 2025. So that's basically going to start from the ground up at discussion and then look forward, looking towards a waterways grant application. Moving to the North Marina, the Presque Isle Marina pier removal and parking lot paving kind of speaks for itself. Seek grant funding, remove the pier, and pave the parking lot. The Public Art Commission is talking about maintenance guidelines, community project review process, and collection promotion. So what they really want to do is create a formal document for maintenance of themselves, their collection that they have, and want to develop guidelines for community-based project submissions. So that's also tied in with the basketball court that they're doing now. The Planning Commission has identified a North Lakeshore Boulevard corridor study. I think it's in our pretty close in the rear view mirror that there were some condos or apartments that were proposed at the old Lakeshore site that created a bit of challenges for the community. And it was kind of an eye-opener for the Planning Commission that perhaps that Lakeshore Boulevard is, for lack of a better term, I think they put in here that it's loved too much, right? And there's a lot of things going on, and they would like to work with NMU to potentially partner on a planning project to do some land use planning for that corridor. Otherwise, seek a consultant for about $20,000 to $30,000. This is the one I had mentioned, public transportation, the Planning Commission. They are on board with the transit study for the city. Sorry, I'm reading really quick and moving along here. And basically what they'd like to do is, be the ones to kind of take the lead on doing some of that work with MDOT and MarkTran. And then we have the Winter City initiatives, which was brought forth by the Planning Commission. This ties into the sidewalk maintenance, and it's really kind of, they're looking at possibly, creating an ad hoc committee to look at maintenance design standards for public spaces and the things along those lines. Previously, they had sponsored kind of a snow summit. I think that was about 6-7 years ago we had done that. So, they would look to do something along those lines. And then we have from Parks and Recreation, a year-round dog park. They the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board would like to identify some locations and necessary amenities for a year-round dog park and then seek funding for that. The Matson Park Playground is also ongoing. That's the inclusive playground. They're continuing to work on that. And that's all. So I can stop the share now.
Thank you, Dennis.
And Madam Mayor, I'll turn it over to you.
Yep, and I think I just have a couple clarifying questions before I turn it over to the commission. So we've got two different documents here. If I heard right, there's a little bit of overlap, at least on one or two of the items. I guess I'm just wondering what the purpose is of having it as two separate documents at this point, just to be clear where it came from?
Yeah, yes, ma'am. That's correct.
So it will be all combined into one document is the goal. And I guess my question
Yes.
before we get too far down the line is, what is the capacity of city staff to do these things? Do we need to cut some of these things, or, you know, that's the piece that I think is kind of an unknown for me at this point.
I guess from, my perspective, I believe that when the departments put these together and forwarded them, I think we have the capacity to at least implement what we put on here. And a lot of it, mind you, is it's mentioned as, let's do a study on this, or let's create an ad hoc committee, or let's hire a consultant to do these things. I think we're going to be in the wheelhouse, and the good news about this is it actually gives us 2 years to start working on it when you talk about the actual implementation of strategic planning. Now, worst case scenario, the world could come halfway to an end. We don't have the money, and then we have to prioritize a few of these things, but that's okay, because really what this document does for us is it helps us when we go into budget time. We should be opening this as department heads and say, okay, this is what the city commission wanted to work on. So as manager and department heads, this is where we need to focus. They've established that policy. Now we need to work towards implementing it, and then we budget accordingly. And then when you go through the budget process, you can make the decision on that. So that's my view on how it would go. Maybe City Manager Angeli has a different take on that, but
It looks like he agrees with you.
That's how I envision it.
That's great. Thank you, Dennis.
I'll just make a brief comment. I agree with that, but there are some things in this plan, for example, the sidewalk maintenance, that if it doesn't, it will be necessary to make some decisions, some budgeting decisions regarding that, because if we have to add staff, there's significant costs. If we have to add equipment, there's a significant cost. So depending on how the commission wants to move forward on that, will depend on the costs.
And to be clear, at this point, we're putting it in the strategic plan, but at this point, we're not funding any of this. It would be this late
Correct.
summer and fall when we would approve whatever that budget is, whatever kind of money we think we have at that point.
Correct, and this is a plan, and it does not hold anybody to anything. It just gives us a guideline or a roadmap to follow.
Well, sorry for stealing the floor, commissioners. I just wanted to make sure we were clear on how that was all going to flow before we got too far down the line here.
Well, yeah, no, you summarized that really well, Madam Mayor. And if I may, if you remember, the master plan has all the great big ideas, and then the strategic plan picks some of those out as reasonable things that we think we can get done. And then when we get in the budget, we actually do it.
Yep, perfect. And I just wanted to make sure that we weren't tasked with maybe cutting 5 or 10 of these things out tonight, or, the way I understand it is these are proposed as what would go forward with whatever feedback or changes we have from the commission here tonight. Or we could opt to cut one, or whatever that looks like. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is our best effort on what we heard you say last time, and what we've weaned as important projects from the community master plan that we think that the time and place is now to start working on these.
Great. Well, I think you did a wonderful job boiling it down. I will start things off with Mayor Pro Tem Hill, and we'll go alphabetical from there. Again, this is your long chance to ask questions, make statements, and then I'll give everyone another chance if they want to ask any follow-up questions.
All right, thank you. I think what I heard, if I can offer a suggestion, and I might just do this myself because it would help me process this, but to create a chart that had, source, plan, and departments, and then the projects, so you could see how they line up and who's doing what, rather than having them on each page. I like to be able to see it all together in one unit. And like I said, I might just do that myself. But I think it would help to see it all together instead of having to flip through page by page. Just titles is fine. I think I can get enough from the titles are descriptive enough to understand. And then I think there's buckets of livability, sustainability, affordability that are important. I think equity and the sense that we're making sure that access to resources in our community is available to everyone, no matter the means that they have, that we're making sure that that's part of the conversation is really important. And I'm going to say a little more about that with a couple of these. But I think that's something I'm coming to understand. If you don't start with that intention, then in making decisions, sometimes you have to, you don't think about what if you don't have a car, which is really the sort of fundamental question I think we want to start thinking about and bringing our attention to what we do. Because even we do sort of operate on the assumption that everyone has a car, but not everyone has a car because of age, whether they're too young or they're too old, or you have health issues and you're not able to drive for a period of time. And so I think that's one way where if we think about that and what that would mean, it would help make everything more accessible for everybody. And so that is, I just wanted to bring that up as a big idea. I'm making a note. And then the question of parking downtown, which is sort of the flip side of that, of all the people who want to come here and want to park. I think the DDA has taken a very serious run at that. And I look forward to the future conversations about that. And I hope we keep it really good communication back and forth as we're thinking about how we design parking for the future, as transportation is really changing and it's going to keep changing in the next 5 to 10 years in really fundamental ways. Okay, speeching done. So on the question of the very first one, this climate adaptation tourism planning, I'm glad to hear that what we're really looking at is our carrying capacity. And I'm really pretty uncomfortable in framing this as just a tourism problem. That is not, I don't think that framing is going to get us at a comprehensive answer for our community. I think what can we reasonably do as a community is a better way to put it that's going to make sure that we're meeting everyone's needs of the people, because in thinking about who lives here, we have also students who are here for some months of the year and not other months of the year. And that drives some of our carrying capacity and our sense of how crowded things are. We also have a lot of snowbirds or people who come here who grew up here and have a second home somewhere else. And so I don't think, I would really urge us to think about this as a carrying capacity question. I think that's a great way to put it, because there's other layers besides tourism that make our community, that are stressing our community. And again, I'm sort of thinking again systematically, this sale of property, I'm concerned that also becomes a one-off, where it's like, well, we built a house here, and we built a house here, and we built a house here, versus, okay, where are all the places that we could build housing, and how many people could we actually bring into the community? And where would that housing go? And I think the ad hoc housing committee is looking, I know they're looking at things pretty comprehensively, but I think it's going to be important. Infill housing is part of the solution, but I think we need to also think bigger about where might we put, where in the community would make sense to have a 20-unit apartment building? Where would that go? And how could we help support that kind of enterprise coming into our community? I'm very excited about all the transit stuff. That's terrific. I think on the emergency response, what I heard Commissioner Stonehouse say that I was really excited about was not just doing a plan, but actually doing an exercise where we went through some kind of emergency together and worked on how to figure that out. I think that would be money well spent. And I would encourage us to go a little further on that one. Then with economic development planning, you've heard me say this, I'm going to keep saying it. I think the broadband needs to stay in public ownership. I know that Nagani went in early with broadband and ended up selling it. I think things are very different now than they were even 5 or 10 years ago. And then I really think we need to, as stewards of public dollars, we need to be looking at public ownership of broadband and not allowing it to go into private hands. All in on the arts and culture stuff. I think that's terrific. I'm very interested in the senior center piece. I think that's going to take years of work, just that and the fire station. I'm glad that those are being raised up and that those are important issues for us to consider, because that's going to take a lot of work to make that happen. And then on the green fleet, I want to be clear. What happened to the transition to a green transportation is not going to happen because you go out and buy 7 trucks on the next capital budget. You look at the life cycle of the equipment that you currently have, and as each one reaches the end of its cycle, you make sure that the criteria that's on the list for replacement is green. And so you pick them off one at a time as you go through. And I'm very concerned where that number came from, because it doesn't have to cost that much. Now, certain pieces of equipment, of course, and there's going to be grants coming. I can absolutely promise you that there's money coming. We could stand up and be a pilot project for a cold climate for some of these different equipment pieces that are coming. So I would be glad to volunteer to help lead that kind of work and support it. But I want to be clear, I'm not asking that we turn everything over tomorrow, but you identify in the cycle of replacement, how can we move it into the new technology? And then on sidewalks, last thing, because I think on the other ones, I've kind of touched on them already. There's actually 2 more things. So on sidewalks, I know it's an interesting question of asking people to be responsible for their sidewalks. And it also touches on the fact that there are a lot of people who don't live here in the wintertime, who are here other times a year, and how will we address that? But when I pulled up the map of where we currently clear the sidewalks, I didn't see much happening on the north side, and I saw a lot more happening in other parts of town. And I'm concerned. I think we need to take that equity lens, take the lens of who owns a vehicle. Can we figure out where people have more car ownership or less car ownership, and think about how to make sure that those areas are served so that people who don't have vehicles can get to where they need to go. And that's what I think, rather than thinking like, oh no, we have to do every sidewalk. Well, that's unrealistic. So yeah, as we start to prioritize, let's identify those areas where people don't have cars, lower income, more children, more seniors who don't have access to their own private vehicle. And then I think The others, I'm encouraged, I really want to see this all brought into one list. Like I said, I think that's a great idea. I don't, and allocating the work so that no one's overburdened, but that we can continue to move towards livability, sustainability, affordability with equity. So, thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Mayer?
Thank you. My thoughts are a little all over, but they're all pretty quick. They're all over. For the, actually the first page in one of the packets, our climate adaptation and tourism plan here. I understand why they're both kind of connected, the two subjects. At the same time, I think it could honestly be separated, and there could be just a focus on our local tourism, as well as just shifting the climate focus of this into our other climate subjects that we have in this. I keep seeing probably, I didn't count exactly, but probably 4 or 5 times mentions of creating ad hoc committees for some of these various different categories, which I think is great. Just my personal thoughts looking at it, I don't know how comfortable I am with a city committee then making another committee that's going to advise us and that committee, if that makes any sense. I feel like it gets kind of far away from the commission at that point, as far as what we're thinking and the direction we're thinking of those things. Also might not be a terrible idea, even looking at, for example, how we have our housing ad hoc committee that Commissioner Bonsall is on. I mean, we got 4, 5, 6 topics there that I know a couple of those off the top of my head. Several of us on the commission probably are more, at least decent subject matter experts on. Wouldn't even be a bad idea doing something similar like that. I do agree with the broadband concept of that staying a public asset. Yeah, I'll leave that one there. I'm trying to get through these quickly here. I think those were just my initial thoughts. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Stonehouse?
Thank you, Your Honor. I have a few things. Looking at the tourism issue, it's kind of surprised me to realize that we do have a dredging issue in Marquette Harbor, the lower harbor. If you look outward from the wall on Madison Park about maybe 100 yards, you'll see a shallower stick of water going down, which is the end of an old dock that used to be there. And if we can have that removed, that's an 8-foot hump literally off the bottom where it's normally about 21, 22. That would be an enhancement to the harbor. Obviously, we're not going to live or die on it, but if we have the ability to capture some federal money to do that, it would be a good thing. I also believe that we need to address the issue of funding within the tourism planning document from some way. Obviously, it's going to cost us money to plan for tourism and to manage it during the summer. We look at additional manpower in terms of park people to run the parks, et cetera. We know the difficulty we had this summer with the overruns at Presque Isle, certainly as well as at McCarty Cove. That costs money. So whether it's a hotel tax or it's some other mechanism, we certainly need to work in that direction. That's what happens when you get overwhelmed. I do not support public ownership of broadband, and I think that would be ludicrous for us to try and move in that direction. I would point out that we are currently serviced by Northern Michigan University, by Spectrum Communications, and as well as the various satellite systems, all of which are private. So we somehow are not going to suddenly push them all off the sky, all off the net, so we have a public system. If BLP steps into the fray, that system would be public. And it would be a case certainly of survival of the fittest, the cheapest, and the most for the less. And that's called democracy, and it's called business. So I would certainly advocate for that direction and support for the BLP and whatever they could do. I might mention that a business package on Spectrum's 200 meg, which is not too shabby. And I'm currently downloading on my own package 119, 120, which is not too shabby. So there are, at this point in time, not looking too far into the future, but at this point in time, we're not really underserviced. I have some questions on hiring a consultant to do our economic development plan. remembering the experience we had with the last one. I don't know how we would validate one that would give us what we really need to do. So that would be of concern. The Ad hoc Housing Committee section, in reading the document, it gives me the impression that it is an execute document. It says things like, forward to report the Planning Commission for adoption, direct the Planning Commission to review and zoning, direct the city manager to implement. Well, we haven't even gone over that yet. We have not evaluated that document. It has had zero public vetting. And by public vetting, I mean a public charade, a public presentation, something that we would do in Lakeview Arena, where we have people with a final document that can go through it, understand it, and talk the issues that they would see in it. Because this is a very changing document for the city of Marquette with implications everywhere. And the people need to have the fullest opportunity to see that. So I would suggest taking this one completely out of the mix until such time as we are able to do the things that we need to do to it.
Which one? I'm sorry, you lost me. Which one is that?
Where's their,
This is the Ad hoc Planning or Housing Commission. Until we are able to fully vet it here, and more importantly, I think vetted with all the citizens in Marquette that would choose to participate. And I
5
don't mean
pages
doing
in.
it over Zoom. I think public art, we need to have a way of kind of getting those folks to actually do some public art, something beyond flat screen. When you think about it, they've done the bike path, they've done buildings, sides of buildings, and they're doing basketball courts. But when do we move off that genre and get into something that would be more public art, as we might recognize it, that looks at our culture, our history, our future, and who we are as a people? And that's the basic understanding of what public art is and what it should be doing for the city. So we've got to figure out a way to nudge them in that direction. Sorry you asked me. I have just a couple more. Interesting ideas with going green. I think we should. I think it should be a priority within the city. I do question hiring a consultant from this perspective. Michigan Tech is doing an awful lot of work with this. They might be an excellent source of partnering with the city to look at how cities can operate and what cities can do to move that market forward without having to go through a consultant. It's also going mainstream. And I think there's so much out there in the literature of what other cities and communities have done that we really, again, have some question, do we need an expert to tell us what we can already find out very, very easily? The document that deals with financial services, interesting and useful, but missing a critical component. We have got to know the status of our brownfields and when they will potentially be paid off, and when we will begin to see a positive cash flow from all of our brownfields. And whether they're 10 years out, 20 years out, or 30 years out, that needs to be part of what we see in the financial side of the house. So I would ask that we certainly do that if we can. Other than that, Your Honor, I thank you for the time. Good presentation, Dennis, appreciate it.
thank you. Commissioner Bonzel?
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Let's see. First of all, I have a few other points that I had planned to address already. But first, just want to thank city staff for all of their hard work on this. And Dennis, thank you for running through this and for your explanation. I would just say, first of all, on the topic of the Ad hoc Housing Committee final report and the action items in this draft priority template with regards to that, I completely agree with Commissioner Stonehouse that we should be including a public input component, perhaps into that year one section of both of those recommendations with regards to housing affordability, but I don't think anybody would be surprised that I don't support removing them entirely. There are 6 points that I'd like to address that I think maybe we could have some more, I'd appreciate some more clarification on, or I think maybe we have a little bit more work to do. So first of all, the issue that a couple of my colleagues have brought up, climate adaptation and tourism. I agree with Mayor Pro Tem Hill and Commissioner Mayor, that these issues are certainly related and tourism is an important component of climate change, but that this should really be approached from a broader, the issue of climate change should be approached from a broader standpoint, I think. I know that in our previous session, we had some discussion about, for instance, of the idea of establishing some kind of carbon neutrality goal and developing a plan to achieve that goal by a specific time. That I'm not sure how that gets folded into here. And it could be as simple as updating our climate adaptation plan. But that I think that a more specific focus on, or I guess I should say a broader focus on climate change and climate adaptation, I think would be appropriate. Let's see. The housing affordability piece, I agree with the comment that it might be helpful after the final report of the housing committee is released that city planning staff and the city commission go through some kind of process of thinking about where we want specific kinds of housing in the city. And I think it'd be important to include specifically in the component about potentially selling surplus city property for affordable housing development and like workforce housing development, that we include protections and guarantees of some kind for long-term affordability, whether that be through development agreements, deed restrictions, silent second mortgages like like Habitat for Humanity uses to guarantee long-term affordability for their homes, things of that nature. I think that's an element that needs to be explored. Let's see, the third point, transit. All I would say is that I definitely think that including marked, ideally, covered bus stops will be important, and also that could be it could present some other opportunities, for example, for potentially some advertising revenue for the city, potentially a way to deploy public Wi-Fi. So having some kind of solid infrastructure there would be good, not only from the standpoint of getting people to actually use the transit service, but potentially providing other opportunities as well. Fourth point that I had was about economic development. I am glad that we are including language about and goals regarding broadband in here. I think maybe we had some miscommunication here as a commission. I think that the intention has always been, when we talk about public broadband, that it's an option that could be provided by the BLP, not to the exclusion of any kind of private service. And I think that while we're having a discussion about broadband, that perhaps a discussion about public Wi-Fi service in the downtown area might be a good place to start having some conversations, be that with the BLP or with the DDA. We're in this strategic plan, we're talking about the downtown and improvements that need to be made to the downtown. We're also talking about broadband, we're talking about economic development, and I think this is an area where we've seen other communities, like for example, Holland, Michigan, Lawrence, Michigan, making investments and having some positive results. I think I'm in the other packet now. Two other things. My apologies. So the fifth point that I had, I like that the Planning Commission is looking at a North Lakeshore Boulevard corridor study. Would just say that I think a good place to start might be considering placing the land that is east of the new Lakeshore Boulevard into either designating it as a new city park and or placing it in some kind of recreation and conservation easement to preserve it, given the development pressures taking place. We might all want to preserve that land, but a commission 10 years from now maybe might not be as enthused about it or prioritize that as much. And the final point I just wanted to make was that I really like the idea of a snow summit. And I think that discussing winter street maintenance and sidewalk maintenance, walkability, outdoor winter activities, definitely something we should be doing. That's all I have.
Commissioner Davis?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As I was preparing for this meeting, I was struck by the number of very significant planning documents that we have at our disposal. And Dennis, I think that you could probably quote them, each one of them verbatim. I think it's a horrendous task to bring them all together, and I appreciate the work that all the city staff does and that, Dennis, that you do to make sure that these documents flow as well as they do. I just want to highlight a few things. Oh, before I do that, I just want to make sure that I'm thinking right. We have year 1 and year 2 here, and actually, Mayor Smith, you asked some of the questions that I was going to ask, so I appreciate that. But year 1 and year 2, are we talking fiscal year so that this plan really is our start of October, even though we might have already begun some of these things?
Yeah, they align with fiscal years. So
Okay.
year 1 would be this coming fiscal year, and then year 2 would be the following fiscal year.
Okay, thank you. I just will quickly highlight a couple things. I was glad to see wayfinding in here, and as I tour other cities, I find that it's pretty easy to find the business district or the Lakeshore, and I really appreciate that some of that wayfinding is in here. In terms of the transit system, and we've had a lot of discussion about this, but one of the questions I like us to always ask ourselves is, can we build that transit system so each one of us will be using that bus system and be comfortable and it will be convenient for us? And that includes a lot of things like the mobile app and GPS and all those things that would make it convenient. And also, the last time we talked here, we talked about mobility in general, and I did see the transit system and the sidewalks, but just to keep that whole mobility about all different modes of transportation in the forefront. The other thing I really liked is a tourism plan, and one of the documents that our city manager sent to us talked about tourism, and I really appreciated the article on Munising in Alger County, how they studied 3 different groups and kept them separate for a year. One was the economic, one was the cultural, and one was the infrastructure, and then brought them together in year 2 and really developed a good plan. And we all know some of the problems they've had with tourism, and I think that we kind of mimic some of those, although we don't have a national park. So I was glad to see that in here. I do want to advocate for one thing, and if I missed it, please let me know, but that is outdoor music opportunities and perhaps the replacement or improvement of our band shell. And I was frantically looking through the 5-year Parks and Rec plan again, and I noticed that outdoor music opportunities was a top priority for the needs for facilities and investment and in programming. And I'm just wondering if that could get into the plan or what our plans are for replacing the band shell.
I can take a stab at that, but I believe it's already in the capital improvements plan. And John, you're here. You want to expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, so if you look at issue title Park Improvements under Community Services, the one that's got a lot of projects in there for the parks, year 2 on that item list, it's probably a little less than halfway down. Prescott Park band shell replacement.
Okay, so I did miss it.
So that would be pending funding, but it's in there, and we're looking at it, and it would be pending grant funding on that.
Oh, there it is. So my apologies, I just missed it. I was looking for it and missed it. That's it.
No problem.
Great. Okay, thanks. Thanks for answering those questions. Commissioner Hanley?
Thank you. First, thank you so much for all the work that was done to put this together. It's amazingly detailed and wonderful and great to go off of. All of the commissioners have touched on some very good topics, so I don't think we need to rehash all of them multiple times, but I did have a couple things I do want to stress. I agree with multiple commissioners that have already mentioned the broadband. I think the BLP going ahead with it and running it as a city thing would be wonderful, and I really would like to see that. when it comes to, one thing that hasn't been touched on, that is, I know an odd one possibly, is the soccer field being made. I know a lot of people have an issue with the baseball fields, which is why they're not used. A lot of the Little League in the area have had issues with the upkeep or with the actual fields themselves and what they're given here, which is hard for a lot of Little League. I just know a lot of the kids in the Little League and the people in charge of it. I know there was a couple years ago, we had an issue with a field where a couple girls got injured pretty badly, and we did fix that one up, but I'm not seeing a lot of fix up on any of our baseball fields, which may be why they're not being used and utilized as much. I worry about taking away 2 of them when we already lack fields so much in this area. Another thing that I looked at was the sidewalks. One of the biggest problems that people have in the winter here is sidewalks. I clear my sidewalk, of course, in the corners, but there are a lot of areas that don't, and there are a lot of school routes that don't, and I think we definitely need to look at the kids walking to school and the sidewalks that are getting cleared. A lot of it in between, I believe Crescent Street and College is one of the big areas that doesn't have any sidewalks cleared between 4th Street and 7th Street, and there is a school over there as well. So I would like to make sure that we're touching on that more. But other than that, I think everyone has really touched on everything more than once. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so I will do a little bit of follow-up on a couple of the things mentioned and a couple of things that were not. So I'll start at the beginning here on this Klein adaptation and tourism. I think on this one, I would actually agree with the pro tem that we should try to broaden this approach a little bit if we can. I liked, clearly Mayor Pro Tem Hill is a little bit more familiar with some of the climate stuff than I am, but I like the idea of taking a little bit of a wider lens on that. So I'm hoping maybe you took some notes on that, Dennis, and can change the language just a little bit on that. As for the ad hoc committee on affordable housing, so there were 2 items related to this, and I think somewhere in here we need to add some kind of language about the fact that it hasn't yet been approved by the commission and that we would like to do some kind of a public forum. And I think that's probably the type of venue, that's what Commissioner Stonehouse had recommended, and I think we've discussed in the past. I know that could be difficult with COVID, but things can change. This is a 2-year plan. We may actually be able to have a public forum at some point. So I just wanted to make sure that we include some language in there to make sure that it's clear that all of these items have not yet been approved by the commission, but will be reviewed and discussed. What else do I have? Economic development. I also share the concerns about hiring a consultant. I would be more in favor of working together with community partners and or potentially hiring our own economic developer if that's something that we wanted to do. But yeah, I am nervous about the consultant piece. I really appreciate the updated Sleeping Dragons list. I don't think I've seen a new one in a little while, and it helps for kind of forecasting and thinking ahead for some of these big ticket items that are coming down the pike. So thank you for including that on there. On the last page, on the kind of the commission related packet, this sidewalks piece, I wonder if it might be a better use of our time, given the number of issues and concerns brought up in the background, to maybe hire a consultant. Just an idea. I guess if other commissioners have a thought on that when I call on you next, I'd like to hear your thoughts on that piece, because I wonder if maybe there's a different solution there that I haven't thought of to get us thinking a little bit more broadly of with our unique snow load situation. There've got to be other cities that have a difficult time with their snow load, like maybe Minneapolis or Duluth. So just a thought. I'm not by no means the expert, but I've walked on many of our sidewalks. I work at the schools. I've walked to the high school for work many a times, and it's not usually plowed, and it can be difficult to walk through. And, I'm an able-bodied person, so I worry about people who are not. And children and, all that. I think that might have been it for my notes. I thought I had one more. Hold on. Oh, I do. The last page of the second packet. Dog park. You're wrong, dog park. Yes, please. I think the community residents, voters have been asking for this. My one request is, if possible, can we make this 100% fenced in? I know it's early in the game to be making that request, but I think that's something that people say a year-round dog park, but I think the left out piece is they don't want their dogs to run away or get, you have to worry about them getting hit by a car or something. So just a note there. Okay, so thank you, Dennis, and I am going to go back to the commission and see what else we have, but I just wanted to say thank you, Dennis. Thank you, staff, for putting together such a robust plan, strategic planning process for us to move forward with. Thank you for allowing us to provide a different level of input this go round than we have in the past. It's certainly appreciated by myself and I think by other commissioners, and you've done an incredible job getting it all together. Looking forward to seeing it meld, as a couple of these items I think will actually end up being combining into one. And I have full faith that we're going to be able to make progress on many, if not all of these fronts, but it would by no means be my expectation that we're going to complete everything in this 2-year plan. But it is helpful to have, because you don't know what grant money might come up, what opportunities may present themselves, and we've got a plan for what we hope to do with those things as they present themselves. So those are my comments for now. Okay, so I'm just going to see if anyone else has any follow-up questions or comments. And as a reminder, I was hoping other commissioners might weigh in on the sidewalks piece. Commissioner Bonzo?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, first to weigh in on the sidewalks piece. I don't know that it's such an intractable problem that we need to hire a consultant. I'm not opposed to it, but I think I need to see more of a justification for what specific complex problems this consultant is going to solve for us that staff couldn't solve on their own or by consulting colleagues in other communities, things of that nature. That's just my initial reaction to that. With regards to following up on the ad hoc housing committee comments that you had, Madam Mayor, and that Commissioner Stonehouse had, as I said before, I think that including some kind of public forum or feedback component as a year one goal for both of these housing committee related items would definitely be something that I would support, and that I think the whole housing committee would probably support. And this is the need for public feedback and engagement is something we've talked about. Opportunity not only to get feedback, but also to educate folks. So 2 questions. So this is maybe like a bit for Commissioner Hanley, given that you made some comments on it, and also for Dennis, but do we have a lack of baseball fields in the community? Because I know that being involved in soccer, that there's definitely scheduling is very challenging for soccer fields, and that adding a new soccer field would allow one field to be rested each year, which would help with maintenance issues. I don't know if there are similar things we're seeing with the baseball fields.
I know that when it comes to girls softball, they don't have, they just took over one of the fields in Harvey, Lions Field out in Harvey, because they didn't have the adequate space in town to have actual games. So I'm assuming that is probably one of the big deals. I also know that there's some of those fields over there I don't think can be used for softball versus there's different limits for the different sizes of the kids' fields and things like that.
Okay, thank you.
Excuse me, Commissioners.
Yeah, I was going to ask if staff have any comments on that.
John, I think, just turned on his camera, so he's available if you want to ask him about the fields.
Sure, John, if you could possibly weigh in on that, we'd appreciate it.
Yeah, so as part of this and as part of the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, we really kind of looked at the usage of all the acreage that we have for athletic fields. And it was determined that the baseball fields weren't using the space to the maximum capacity. So that doesn't necessarily mean that that each field wasn't used. It means in part that, you know, maybe the dimensions, the field sizes, the length from the home plate to the back fence, you know, the dimensions of the bases might not be the most appropriate layout for our use. So through the Parks and Rec Master Plan, it was determined that we aren't using the fields in the most efficient manner. The second piece of that was that, as Commissioner Bonzel alluded to, that our soccer fields are in rather rough shape, and the reason behind that is that we don't have the opportunity to rest those fields to the degree that is recommended by industry standards. So in order to have a very well-managed and adequate playing surface on a soccer field, you really need to be able to take that field out of commission for a certain portion of the season, rest it, keep players off of it in order to do maintenance and to allow for recovery. So it was determined that a third or a fourth extra field for the soccer folks was necessary in order to allow for that portion of the maintenance. So that's where we got to. We think we can rearrange things in such a way to better utilize baseball fields and to make room for one more soccer field that would allow us to best manage all the athletic fields.
Thank you, John. That's really helpful. I do remember this being a topic of discussion when we were drafting the Parks and Rec master plan on PRAB, and so I definitely support creating a new soccer field. I think there's a need for it, but I think that it'll be important to engage with both the baseball community and the soccer community to figure out what's the best way to make this work. So would encourage that. And then the last thing is just this is a question probably for Dennis, to a point that was made earlier by one of my colleagues, I don't remember who, what happened to the idea of hiring an economic development planner to manage this, economic development plan and the economic development efforts we want to undertake? Because I remember that was something we were talking about at the previous session.
And
I believe we put that in the recommendation to do an analysis on that.
You did. Yep, it is in there. I'm just trying to find it as we talk about it here. In year one, it was in there for an economic, consider.
It was in year two. Sorry, I wrote the sheet. It was in year two that we recommended hiring a consultant to review or update the current economic development plan, or write a new one if that's what they determined.
Yep, and that's where I think maybe I was just a little, just making sure, because in year one, we put evaluate the addition of an economic development planner to city staff, and then in year two, budget and seek RFPs for a consultant to review and update the EDP, so.
Yeah, and the first one was to evaluate the addition of an economic development planner. I believe that's what you were referencing.
Yeah, I was, and I guess, my thought process, sorry, I missed that in the year one component, but I guess given that we're already looking at potentially hiring an economic development planner, why not just have them do the plan instead of a
Potentially,
consultant?
if we were to hire one, yeah.
Yeah, anyway, that's just my thought. I'm done now. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else with additional follow-up questions or feedback? Commissioner Mayor?
Thank you. I personally am in favor of hiring a new individual for that over a consultant, and I can briefly mention why. But when, at our last work session, I mentioned economics is more of an art than a science. So when we can have community stakeholders, local, economic planner, it's part of city staff that kind of knows the area and actually knows what they're looking at versus, we have people that specialize in state economics or, regional economics, all these different things. You have national economic advisors and things like that, and they specialize in those. Where my viewpoint, the consultant, if we pay someone to come in and advise us on that kind of subject, they don't really understand our area near as well. I don't think we're going to get near as productive feedback from that as we could have from working with our own teams, our own local community leaders and things like that. The sidewalk aspect, I believe you asked for some input on, Madam Mayor.
It's the last page in the packet, in the first packet.
Thank you. I think a good approach for it is maybe just looking at, maybe this would involve a consultant. I'm not sure if we would need that, but, looking at it, examining, identifying our more high foot traffic areas and kind of going from there, and kind of breaking it down into more of a smaller segmented kind of task instead of looking at a whole picture of it But I also didn't comment last time, but I do appreciate the sleeping dragons, as we're calling them, being included in here. Made me a little nauseous looking at it, but that's okay.
Right, that's the, yeah.
I had one more thing. Oh, I do like the concept of having the public forum for the affordable housing conversation. As far as that item in general, that was personally, when we were first identifying our like top 3 priorities or top 5, that was one of my top 3. So as far as where I stand on that, I hope that answers that, but that's all I have.
Commissioner Stonehouse?
Thank you, Your Honor. Couple of quick hits. Low-lying fruit. I think we can have Wi-Fi downtown without any particular difficulty. The manager sits on the DDA Development Board. DDA is the people that would be doing that anyway. We know the cost is not very much. We think the benefits would be very high, and I think we simply should ask Mike or his successor that this is one of the priorities they're trying to accomplish.
Did you get that? Mike?
So that one can be dealt with relatively easily. Back to the DDA, though, I think asking to have 3rd Street or any portion of that street beyond what they have now added to the TIF is something that we would probably ask them, what are you going to give us for it? In other words, if you want to trade this street, we'll take that street. Because the city does have the requirement to maintain police, fire, DPW, et cetera. We need the basic operating capital. And though the DDA does good work and great work, in fact, we can't keep funding them by taking the money from our tax base for the streets. That's not a sustainable methodology. I will return back again, though, to the ad hoc housing report. We can't treat it as a light document. We can't treat it as something we put in there and, oh, we're going to look at it later. Later, we're going to do a public forum for it or something. We're going to get some public input for it. It is too important of a document to treat it in such a cavalier fashion or give the impression that we have improved it, in any way improved it. We haven't. We haven't even seen it as a commission. We haven't read it. We haven't had a chance to go through it. We did see a draft, but we have not seen the final document. So to say we're going to put it in what will be a final document, I think is a reach, and we should not do that because we're not doing due diligence to it. We need to take it through the process, and then we add it when it's ready to be added and vetted and comfortable with it. We have something that we can support and that does what we want it to do for our city. There is no compelling rush that it has to be pushed in here as a draft document. We don't need to do that. We should not, as a matter of policy, do that. Thank you for your time.
Mayor Pro Tem Hill?
I would like to introduce the idea that one meeting to discuss housing is not enough. And I think that's not the way to think about public participation. Public participation is an ongoing conversation. And so to say, oh, well, we had a meeting and we're done is actually not the way to think about it, that this is all part of, I think that there's a larger, as we go through our master planning process that we're going to have coming in front of us, there are ways to structure those meetings so that there's more engagement and conversation around the concepts. So where you take it up to the 20,000 foot level and talk about, what would it mean to have 1,000 more people live in Marquette? And what would it mean if we took some of the big commercial vacant properties and made them into townhomes? I know that idea has been floated for the hospital site, where we'd have 2 or 3 story townhome developments as row houses, so that to make them more affordable, because you can have more houses on a space and have fewer, assuming that people have fewer vehicles. There's lots of different ways to, and to have a much more online engagement. Now, not everyone has online access, but certainly a lot of people's capacity has been beefed up in the last year. And so we would have to do a hybrid of in-person and online ways of participating. There's, I agree that it's a very important topic. I disagree that it's somehow different than any of the other proposed things we have in this document. a lot of these things haven't been vetted. So I think it's unrealistic to say that that one thing, the sidewalk stuff hasn't been, there's not a plan. So, I mean, in fact, that's, we're in the process of developing one. That's what all of this is. So I think to just pull one piece out because it's not fully baked yet, when most of this stuff is not fully baked yet. That's why we're here. That's why we're talking about it. On the sidewalk piece, I'd be happy to provide references to national organizations that are supporting this work. We have Patrick Coleman just up the road in Houghton, who's an international leader on winter cities. We have, there's a group called Active Living by Design, and their leader is a woman from Michigan who I know, who I'd be happy to talk to us and bring us many, many resources about how this works. She and I have worked together since 2004. So there's resources where we can do the thinking without having to, think it through. So it's meeting time, yes, but then work through how to process the questions. And to your point, Commissioner Mayor, of starting with high foot traffic areas, you have to be careful because what happens is people go where they're safer and they may want to actually go somewhere else. Like you were talking about, you're trying to get to the high school. There's actually not a sidewalk in front of our high school on Fair.
Yeah, there is.
Well, but you can't cross the street. I'm sorry, you can't.
There's no crosswalk.
Yeah, there's no, so you're supposed to have gotten to the other side of the street. Like, that's just, we can do better than that. I know someone who was hit, this winter crossing the street there. So I think in making it that much safer for people will really improve. And then a last point, a common metric in this conversation is to use someone pushing a stroller. If you can push a stroller, then then everyone else can access the space. And so let's aim for that, and then everything else will fall out from that. Thank you, Commissioner Davis, for bringing up the music. That was a really good point. And there was one other thing, but I do appreciate all the work. This is I'm really glad that we're able to have these conversations, and I really appreciate the time and consideration that's gone into this, and the Sleeping Dragons list too.
Any other commissioners? Questions, comments, last minute quickie things? Commissioner Stonehouse?
We do realize that plowing the sidewalks is a function of one operator and one machine.
Yes.
That's all it is, determining what sidewalks you want to plow. So we can easily ask Scott to do the math and to tell us what it will cost to add additional clean machines and operators. And then we have a decision to make of how do we deploy that asset. We don't need a consultant to come in and tell us to do that. I mean, this is City 101 sub 2. It's about as low city operations you can get, I think. So again, I encourage us to think in those terms. I also encourage us, Your Honor, to think that ad hoc housing document is one of the critical documents within what we're doing. And it is not something that should be treated cavalierly in any sense. It takes a lot of work from the commission to finally approve it. It's going to take a lot of work for the citizens of the city to accept it, to understand it, and to support it. And we need to do that not as an afterthought, not as an afterglow, not as a quick push through, but that is, I will argue, the most important document we have in front of us. Thank you.
Point well made. We heard you the first couple times. I understand that it's important, and we will have another read on this before this whole strategic plan is approved by the commission. But I would agree that there are a lot of half-baked concepts in here, and I would like to keep it in as is with some additional language about making sure we've got a public process and softening the language to make sure that we're cognizant of the fact that the commission has not approved the plan yet. And I think that would suffice. Okay, Dennis, I'll give you a chance to weigh in, ask any clarifying questions, wrap it up, and then I'll just see if the city manager has anything at the end here, and then we'll go to public comment.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I really don't have anything to add other than thank you for making this easy tonight. I have taken notes. I'll talk with the department heads that we might need to make a few changes on, look at those items and get those to Mike, and we'll move forward from there. So yeah, thanks for making this easy tonight, and have a good night.
Great. One follow-up question, Dennis, before you get off. You're going to take this back, do some work, bring it back to us. Do we have a deadline of when we have to approve the next strategic plan? Is it maybe June? Is that what's coming to mind?
Yeah, we usually do that in June, so we've got a little bit of time to massage a few things here. But I do, while it's fresh, I want to meet with the department heads and get these cranked out as soon as possible and get them back into your hands.
Good. And that timeline would make sense, so we would have it well in advance of the budget conversations. So, okay, just thinking through how that timeline would work. Thank you. And I'll turn it over. I'm not
You're
sure
welcome.
if the
Thank
city, yep, and I'm not sure if city manager Mike Angeli has anything to add at this point.
Just to thank Dennis and the staff for doing a good job on all of this. They've worked really hard. That's it.
I would agree. Okay, I'm going to open up our second public comment session of the evening. Public comments may not exceed 3 minutes per person. Please state your name and physical address. Do we have anyone? Public comment is now closed. We are adjourned at 6:51 p.m. Thanks, everyone.
Goodbye.